Think of a time when you got some news that was so wonderful that you just had to share it with everyone. I think back when my first child was born. It was November 11th, 1983. Katie was several days early, and no one expects the firstborn to be early and quick. We went to the hospital at about 1 in the morning, and Katie was born about 6:30 in the morning. We wanted then to call everyone we knew, but it wasn't easy. Cell phones were in their infancy. There was no Facebook, no Twitter. The internet was still in its infancy as well, so we had to use the payphone. Calls were a quarter, and we used several dollars calling family and friends that morning. Each person we called offered to spread the news, but we wanted to do it ourselves. So we would ask them to keep it quiet until we could make our announcement. I mention this today because it's what Jesus said to the crowd after healing the man. The gospel stated, he ordered them not to tell anyone. My wife and I experienced the miracle of birth, and these people experienced the miracle of healing. Both are things you can't keep hidden or quiet about. You want to tell everyone you know, but Jesus had his reason for not wanting the word to get out, and it all has to do with the changes that which then would occur. Just as your life changes when a baby comes into your family, so would Jesus' life be changed after performing this miracle. As the word spread, the reputation of Jesus would precede him. He would no longer be able to go from town to town in anonymity. He would be sought out for healing by every person with a handicap, a physical deformity, or an evil spirit within them. Well, I thought of this gospel last weekend when I was privileged to baptize my granddaughter, Claire. During the rite, the ears and the mouth of the child are touched, and the prayer that is said is, "The Lord Jesus made the deaf hear and the dumb speak. May he soon touch your ears to receive his word and your mouth to proclaim his faith, to the praise and glory of God the Father." This is the rite of Ephatha. Ephatha, as we just heard, is Aramaic for be opened. Here we're asking that a newly baptized child, a child who's been publicly introduced into the church, have their ears open to hear the word and their mouth open to proclaim that word. So it begins when we're children. It's at the beginning of our lives that we're charged with hearing and proclaiming the word, because it's here that we start a new life with Christ. As a symbol of this newness, we wear that white garment for baptism. The white garment is a sign of dignity we have with Christ. So the deaf man Jesus heals also begins that new life of dignity, and the spittle of Jesus may just represent that water of baptism. His ears and mouth are open to hearing and proclaiming the word now. In a way, this is part of his baptism into living the public life as a Christian. You begin your public life as a Christian at baptism as well. We know this man's ears and mouth were open because Jesus also said to the deaf man, Ephatha, when Jesus touched the man's ears and mouth. We know that they were open because he immediately began to speak plainly. How can your life not be changed when you've just been handed the gifts of hearing and speech? How could you not run out and tell everyone you know? So once again, we deal with the changing of a person. The man in today's gospel was physically changed. But I believe there was more going on here. And that's because Jesus didn't heal him in the middle of a crowd. He didn't heal the man right out in the open. He took the man off by himself, away from the crowd. Jesus may have done this so there was no distraction, but I think it was more because it was a private healing. I think it was something personal, something closer to the heart of this man. I believe it was the healing of his heart as well. That makes me think of the sacrament of reconciliation. The people of those times believed that if you did something bad, you were punished by way of a physical malady, a loss of wealth, something along those lines. When God forgave you, you were healed both physically and spiritually. Here this man seems to be needing the healing of the heart. He seems to have needed to unburden himself, so he'd no longer be spiritually deaf. Maybe some of us know what that feels like. Mother Teresa did. She'd been quoted as saying that most of her life she felt separated from God. She felt abandoned by God, apart from his graces. She even wrote letters to the Pope concerning her feelings and how to go about her ministry without the feeling of being connected to God. This could be the story of the deaf man in today's gospel as well. He could have been spiritually dead, and without any way to make that connection to God, or even a rabbi, because he could not hear and he could not speak. Sign language was not around, so he had no way of communicating. He had no avenue to healing except when Jesus arrived. Even if he could communicate, because of his speech impediment, he was unclean, so he was kept out of the city. As such, a person was not allowed to touch or even speak to this man, or they too would be unclean. And as we heard in last week's gospel, being unclean was being in sin, and a long, complicated ritual was needed to cleanse oneself from that condition. So I think going into the confessional is a little bit easier. Going through this cleansing ritual and the sacrament of reconciliation both do the same thing. They heal spiritually. We're in the privacy of our hearts, realizing the times that we've turned from God, the times we did not do as God asks, and we ask for forgiveness, to have our heart open to the Word of God. The deaf man physically had his ears open to hearing the Word, his mouth open to proclaiming that Word, and his heart healed to accepting that Word. That gift is available to all of us here. It started in baptism and continues through reconciliation. And as we've heard in the previous several weeks' Gospels, it comes to us in the form of bread and wine at the altar. Now, looking at all three readings and tying them together, we see that Isaiah is prophesying that there is salvation to come. There is forgiveness, and there will be renewal for those who seek, whether they're blind, deaf, lame, or mute. Isaiah states that there will be forgiveness for these people because, as I've mentioned earlier, in those days people were seen as suffering a malady if they were not clean of heart. So there would be renewal and there would be vindication. Vindication would come to those who show no partiality, according to St. James in the second reading. James is telling us not to favor those who have fine clothes over those who have shabby clothes. The reason for this is because you can't judge a book by its cover. Just as one does not know what story is behind the cover of a book, one does not know the faith that lies beneath the clothes of a person. And that faith will be what saves that soul over one who has lost their way because of the misuse of the wealth that they may have received in this world. Now, that's not to say everyone who has money or position has lost their way. Nor is it true that everyone with shabby clothes is a saint. But choosing one over the other does put your soul in jeopardy. Making the right choices in favor of what God would want us to do is the saving decision. Making that decision, you can think of that contemporary saying that asks, what would Jesus do? James said in the second reading that God has chosen those who are poor. Jesus set that example. Jesus came for the poor, but he also came for the lost and the sinners. So those of us who are poor, who are lost, who are sinners, we're the ones God is wanting to come to him. Like the deaf man who needed a healing to open his heart to the Word, so do we, so we don't cut ourselves off from God. So that takes a conscious effort. We must hear his word and witness to that word. We must do this by proclaiming it ourselves, Just as the lectors proclaim the word today, right here at this ambo, because they share it. They share it publicly. The word proclaim means just that, to share openly or publicly. This is why we proclaim the gospel, because we're making it public. We have made our Christian lives public at our baptism. We've made our repentance through the sacrament of reconciliation. And we make our acceptance through communion. When we hear the word, then we can proclaim it ourselves through our words and our actions. Jesus did that. The people who saw the deaf man healed that day wanted to do that as well, immediately. This is what the good news is all about. Whether it's the birth of a baby, whether it's the healing of a sick one, or whether it's just us helping each other every day. It's our Christian life set in motion by baptism. It's our promise to Jesus every time we take communion. So let us always remember that in our hearts.